Welcome to Afterlife Topics and Metaphysics. This is your host Cyrus, still here in Osaka, Japan. Same backdrop, same black sweater, and I think I might need a haircut soon. Check this out. When I'm living out of a backpack abroad, sometimes I forget to do things like get my hair cut. So, I don't know. At the same time, I like my hair when it gets longer, so I don't really know. I'm going to have to think about this one. It's also too expensive to get haircuts in Japan. Like it's gonna cost me like $40, I think, which is too much for me. Back when you can get haircuts back in Southeast Asia for $6, and they come out pretty good. So I don't know. Maybe I'll wait until I'm in Vietnam. Anyway, enough with the BS. Today is a philosophical video, so I do the nuts and bolts videos, talk about like parapsychology, things like that. Sometimes I pepper in philosophical points that inevitably come up when we talk about spirituality, life after death, and this is one of them. I sometimes like to challenge sacred cows, and so maybe I'll do that a little bit too. I don't want to go on too long on this video though, so let's just jump into it. But first, if you're new around here, please hit that subscribe button, click that notification bell, hit that like button, help keep this work going. If you like what I have to say, if you don't like what I have to say, then hit that dislike button and you don't have to keep coming back here. But if you do like it, then, subscribing or liking keeps the channel going because it tells YouTube that the channel is relevant. It's weird how important that is. I wish it wasn't so important. It's stupid having to keep doing that for video after video, but it's just the way this silly platform operates. To continue. So the topic today is individuality the key to, quote, enlightenment? Now I'm asking this because in a lot of Eastern religious areas, which I'm familiar with, and I've spent a lot of time in Buddhist countries, there is a prerogative to lessen individuality, put it on the back burner, and join with the cosmic collective. If possible, destroy the self altogether and merge back into oneness. That is a common theme, and while I do believe doing this is possible, it's arguable whether this is true enlightenment, as people talk about. Now, enlightenment level consciousness, to be perfectly honest, it's not something that I have been able to experience, which is like full unity consciousness with everything in this highly transcendental moment. But I have a kind of like overall, I think, thing that happens kind of like that. So I have done a lot of meditation, I have done a lot of astral experiences, I have done a lot of spiritual work, and so I'm at this like thing that I kind of have going on where I feel really connected and I have a lot of fun engaging in and doing activities, even if it's very mundane. So it's almost like I've trained myself to do that. I later learned that this is a symptom of like so-called unity consciousness. For example, if I'm out taking a walk, I'm really, really into it. I love the trees, I love the mountains, I love the fresh air. I love how it smells. I can absorb into all of that very quickly, and as opposed to being in my own headspace, worrying, having fears and anxieties. Took some training to get to that point, but I mean it is a very Buddhist principle. And I think I'm kind of at that point, or have been for the last few years. But where I depart from some of these ideas is when it comes to like banishing away the individual and so-called complete ego death, which means you no longer are who you are. Because there's actually this really interesting contradiction that we see. The contradiction involves the idea that we banish away the self. But what about self-realization, self-actualization? I'm sure you've heard those words before. So the archetype or the example is you have somebody who's living, quote, in the matrix and is just going about, the drudgery of life, but they're not connected with who they really are or what's going on around them or even their unique ideas and what they're capable of. They have this awakening that happens to go on a self-discovery mission. and they've realized they're capable of all these things they never imagined before. They quit their job, they create some business, or they change the world, make some organization, because all along, while they were just slaving away, washing dishes or doing some menial job, they had within them all of this powerful potential. So you can argue that this is an awakening of the individual. This is an awakening of a greater individual self that has all of these unique powers and talents. So this is what I'm interested in. So when you see somebody who is not living up to their potential, and they're just, as an example, repeating the same motions every single day, but they have all this untapped power inside of them. To get all that out, they have to have an awakening experience, and the end result of that awakening experience is broadening their individuality. So they go from being very low on the individuality spectrum to being much higher on it. So if you're slaving away in a job and you just distract yourself with alcohol and video games and celebrity gossip when you get home, and you have all this untapped potential, you go back and just continue that routine, what's happening is that your individuality is actually very low. So you're almost as like you're asleep. And so the whole idea about spiritual awakening is waking up out of that and becoming closer to your divine self, which is kind of like being on a path to individual godhood. So you are awakening to that level. So that's the idea. Now we can look at other areas of like spiritual information that lines up with this. For example, in past videos I talked about like animal group souls, and there's a theory, and we do hear about it in certain sects of spiritualist Buddhism, but I've heard it elsewhere, like in channeled material, and I've also heard about this from people I've spoken to in astral states, like on the other side, who I've had conversations with about this, which is the idea that a consciousness begins very low, as in a group soul. So let's say that you were a grasshopper, right? And so you're part of the grasshopper group soul, but that one little grasshopper among billions, that's sitting in a field someplace, has a little tiny bit of individual awareness. And it's not until that individual awareness begins to spring forth that it begins evolving and is able to then incarnate into a body that's more suited for that. So maybe from a grasshopper it becomes a puppy, which has a greater individual awareness, and then from a puppy, someday it becomes a human, which has very high distinguished individual awareness. And then from a human, well, what do we become then? You would think if it goes along that pattern, whatever we become after human has even greater individual awareness of itself and its kind of its separate unique path. But so it's very contradictory, because you think, okay, spiritual awareness is going closer to oneness with God, which would mean that would actually mean devolving back into a less advanced form and more into a group soul, right? So you could say then, a rock has no individual awareness, but if there's a big rock group soul, it's a part of that whole collective. But we're not going back into being rocks. We are going into individual godhood. So that's the big separation. And that's why I think when it comes to spiritual, quote, awakening, we need to look at it in terms of expanding our individuality. And the big issue isn't that you're too unique or you're too individual and you need to climb back into the cosmic womb, back into God's womb, crawling back in, that's not the issue. The issue could be that you have not expanded your individuality enough. Maybe you need to go take up music, do something creative, find ways to express yourself. Now, I'm in Japan at the moment, and it's interesting how much pent up expression I see. Yesterday I went to a cosplay festival here in Osaka, and Japanese people are so conformist and so attached to the group soul identity of their culture that many of them are just bursting at the seams to be creative and to show off their individual sides, their spiritually awakened sides, so that they are desperate to express that and burst out of the collective, which is so powerful in Japan that's why there's parades for people to dress up as characters from TV shows and fiction, because they desperately want that opportunity to do that. Even more so than in the West, where many of us are naturally attuned more, I think. Doesn't mean the Japanese are less spiritually advanced. They're just stuck into a group soul collective, I think, a lot more than others, while maybe not going on the individual path so much. But as we know, if we look at a hierarchical kind of scale of like from a rock to a grasshopper to a puppy to a human, it's the more you expand your awareness as the greater individual, the more you are expanding what you are to greater and greater levels. So I want to point this out. It is contradictory, because you hear about, if you go through mainstream kind of spiritual sources or East religion, they recommend the opposite of this. Meditate and find awareness, find stillness, but give up all your worldly possessions, become a monk, live in a cave, and meditate 12 hours a day. That's an aspirational thing to do. Whereas you could also look at a rock star who has obtained, maybe they seem very could easily be too materially attached, but they've learned how to create a massive footprint of themselves in the universe, and being able to branch out into this kind of higher spectrum version of themselves that is usually hallmarked by incredible creative potential. So it's interesting. There's a dynamic of the Buddhist monk or the rock star. Who has a greater spiritual awareness? Maybe they both do. It's just that we need to look at that as different elements that we probably need to embody. You can't really, I think, go on one path without the other. So the highly conformist group of monks, maybe it would do them a lot of good to branch off and go write a book or make a band, or express their artistic sides, or develop their individual creative power, as opposed to just being part of like a unity with everybody else, which while an argument can be made for joining the unity level, just a group soul collective, I don't think it's why we're here. I think that it's more like becoming individual godhood, as opposed to being permanently part of a different group soul. It's about making your own group soul, branching off. And therefore, in a way, that could very well be kind of the life cycle of a soul. Just some ideas to think about. Complicated stuff, theories, that's all they are. Hypotheses, different ways of looking at some of this information. So, something to think about. There's a lot more we could probably get into in this subject, but let me know in comments what you think. You can head to afterlifetopics.com for more. Get involved at Afterlife Topics and Metaphysics, the Facebook group. You can support the work I do with buying a couple of my books, such as Understanding Life After Death, The Afterlife and Beyond, and thanks for watching. Again, I'm sorry if I'm not speaking very loud. I'm in a hostel. I don't want to interrupt people, bring too much attention to myself doing this, because then people start like harassing me with questions like, hey, I overheard you talking about astral projection. Can I, what do you think about that? But I love having conversations with people, but it's funny when you do this and then people eavesdrop, then it's like they want to talk about it for like 6 hours, which is awesome. I love doing that. But sometimes when I'm just kind of like I'm hungry and I want to go outside and get some sunlight and have some tea and buy some food. Like, you know, maybe tonight I'll do that, but you know, sometimes I just don't want to be bothered, you know what I mean? Anyway, I guess that's it for this video. I'll catch you guys next time.